Hi, my name is Michael Goodfriend, and I'm the executive producer of the Play On podcasts. One of the most interesting characters in King Lear is Edmund. He's the illegitimate son of the Earl of Gloucester, and in the course of the story, he becomes one of the most villainous of all of Shakespeare's characters. But, like all great characters, he's complex and multifaceted. He's funny. He's charming. And in this case, he's a real lady killer. Playwright Marcus Gardley, who translated King Lear and adapted the play for the series with Catherine Eaton, said that he thinks Edmund is one of the most sympathetic characters in the story. I wanted to get a closer look at this intriguing person, so I decided to bring in someone equally intriguing, maybe even more intriguing, is the actor who portrays him in this series, Tramell Tillman. Tramell is an accomplished stage and screen actor who's on the cusp of a brilliant career. I'd say he's well established. And in his own right, he's every bit as charismatic as the character that he portrays, but he's a lot less despicable. So I thought it'd be good to bring him in here, not only to talk with him about his work on this series, but also about his work in other mediums, his career, the life he's been leading as an actor and an artist. So Tramell, welcome to the Play On podcast bonus content series for King Lear.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love that introduction. It's fantastic.
Well, you are worthy of it, to be sure. Is Edmund a villain?
I don't think he is. I think this is a guy who is seeking justice. He's seeking what he feels he's rightfully deserved. And, he's in a circumstance or in a situation where if there's something that you want, you go take it. We've seen that, other countries come into Lear's territory and they commandeer. This is the environment. You can play nice if you want, but how far does that get you? And I imagine not only just being in the house of Lear, but just watching so many of his colleagues and compatriots and fellow generals or men, period, just having everything, so much of things taken from them. And Edmund is at a point where he knows that he is worthy of land and worthy of recognition. So he goes after it. Now, I think what gets the better of him is that his ambition. I think that greed kind of takes over. He's relishing in all of this, and he becomes blinded to his purpose. But I believe that stepping into the shoes of Edmund, you can't look at him as a villain.
Is this the first villain you've played? Have you played other villainous characters?
I have definitely been introduced to other villainous characters. I did Aaron the Moor in Titus Andronicus. I also played Sergeant Brown in Carmen Jones at Classic Stage. I've also have been introduced to the Bastard in King John. So playing these characters have been really, really rewarding because they're so complex, right? And the trap would be to play them as evil, maniacal, mustache twirling and like that. And it's just like, yeah, that could be fun to a certain extent, but where's the heart? Where's the humanity?
So when you approach a character like Edmund, what are you looking for? What is the way in? How do you find that?
I'm looking for their heart. I'm looking for their vulnerability. What is it that they want? What is it that they need? What is it that they seek after? It's more than just the land and the riches and the elaborate schemes. There's something, the internal engine that is driving Edmund has got to be deep. I don't think he's a heartless character. So there has to be something that is propelling him forward to be able to look past all of the malicious deeds that he's doing. It's got to be something there.
Did you pinpoint it in any, was there one specific thing that you were able to really grasp onto that pulled you through in his heart?
I believe it has to be the relationship with his father. You know, in the end, the last speech where there's Edmund, there's Edgar, and Albany, right?
Right. There's that line in there that Edmund says, "I was your speech has softened my heart."
Mm-hmm.
It's Edgar's telling of the story that softens Edmund's heart.
Yeah, yeah, and his even his confession of what has been done. You know, he sends out the troops, if you will, with the sword, about the proof about Cordelia and the plan to have them killed. You know, that there has to be some level of humanity there. There's got to be some level of, for lack of a better word, heart. You know, he has to have that. Otherwise, he would have just died being this maniacal bastard, which he's not, you know. I think he was moved by Edgar's journey, and he was touched by the carnage that has transpired, probably humbled by the fact that he's been overtaken and that he's reaching his end.
It's amazing to me that Shakespeare starts this entire story with a conversation between Gloucester and Kent. At the very beginning of the whole story, we get your father, Edmund's father, talking about his bastard son in really, you know, kind of, I mean, there's not even kind of, just derogatory terms, you know, joking about the fact that he's illegitimate. And it gives you this runway as an actor, this incredible source material to make you sympathetic, to make you somebody that we care about, that we feel for.
For she conceived him from her womb, then laid him in a cradle long before she bedded a husband. I suppose this makes her sinful.
Perhaps, but her sins may be forgiven since the boy seems blessed.
Wait till you meet my eldest. Oh, he was born under lawful bond and has been the spark in mine eyes ever since he was a sprout. They are both dear to me.
My lord.
Oh, thank you very much, thank you. Although this one, the bastard, came into the world wild as weeds, for his mother had the face of a flower. She and I did roll around in the hay, which made making him good sport. Come, meet my bastard.
When you found out you were going to be doing this role, what type of background work did you do to prepare?
Well, I was familiar with King Lear. Working with Play On at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival really helped launch me into introduction into King Lear in depth. You know, working with Louis Douthat and her fabulous team, I was able to be on the preliminary stages, if you will, with this translation piece. So there was a lot of hours that went into combing and sussing out what this piece is saying, and basically giving voice to help Marcus Gardsey and Philippa, the dramaturg at that time, really bring all of this together. When we were stepping into the translation with this particular adaptation led by ERIC Ting, it felt so different. And the world is very specific that I leaned more into the world that was being built with having the knowledge in the background there, you know, because it definitely serves in telling the story.
So at a certain point, you kind of leave behind everything that came before this production, and you dive completely into the world that we've all agreed it's going to be set in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you familiar? What's your familiarity with the Bay Area and the world that this actual series takes place in?
I know nothing about the Bay Area, I'll be honest. Nothing at all. I have been to California. I went to LA and wanted to go to the Bay, but just haven't had the opportunity. And so I was learning a lot, listening to the soundscapes that were being built, you know, the jazz inserts, reading the dramaturgical evidence or the dramaturgical pieces that were offered. I learned how diverse it was in that time period. There was this cultural renaissance that was happening in the Bay Area during that time, and that was really exciting. And what I believe is really telling about this installation of Play On, or this installation of the podcast rather, is we get to see that eclecticism live in this piece, with the different voices and different cultures melding into this one piece.
So this was a San Francisco in your mind, the world that Edmund inhabits. It was something that just came through information that you were given, and then your own just imagining of what that atmosphere would have felt like and been like for him.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a big follower of jazz. I love jazz. So the mood of it was very familiar. It was just the location just wasn't as so. So it was helpful to have the pictures of San Francisco there as well. So that kind of bridged the gap, if you will.
Was this your first work with Marcus Gardley on anything that he's written?
Yes, it is. I have read his work. I've seen his work. I saw him. I saw his production of The House That Will Not Stand, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful, heartbreaking, and brilliant. And always wanted to be in the same room with him and work with him. And this was a great opportunity to do so.
How did the language land for you? Was there a period of sort of adjustment going from Shakespeare into Gardley, or was it immediate?
The language Marcus utilized felt very urgent for me, felt very present. You know, with Shakespeare, you know, you kind of have to dig your heels in a little bit. You turn around, kind of take your time, you know, get your dictionaries out and your guides and whatnot, which is also fun. You know, I'm a big nerd, so I love to learn and discover new words and cadences and so forth, and allow the text to be clues into the character and what's happening. But with Marcus, it just felt with such ease. It spewed. It just came out from the body, out of the mouth, and felt very forward and very active.
Can you take us on the journey from the very beginning to now, to this interview? What is this journey for you? How did you become an actor? When did you know you were going to be an actor? And how did you find your way into the whole Play On universe? I know you mentioned Louis and Oregon Shakespeare Festival, but get us to that point. Michael,
how much time do you have?
I got all day.
You got
all day.
I started acting when I came out the womb. I believe that. My family is full of characters. You know, I jokingly say that when people ask me, you know, are there other actors in your family? I was like, yeah, but I'm the only one who gets paid for it, you know? So being able to take space and take stage was a skill set that I was learning at a very young age. I was very shy.
Lots of siblings, or were you first?
No, I was the last. It was
You're the last. You're the baby.
Yeah, 6 of us. Yeah, I'm the baby. Lots of cousins, aunts, uncles, you know, on both sides of the family. You know, family reunions growing up. So it was a lot of energy, a lot of joy.
Rural, urban, what city, what
So
part of the country?
Yeah. I grew up in Largo, Maryland. I was born in Washington, D.C., and Largo is a suburb of Maryland, right outside of D.C. My parents grew up in Virginia, Petersburg, Virginia, and Danville, Virginia. So it's very rural communities. And a lot of the time was spent in self-entertainment, if you will. So when the TV was on the fritz or the radio wasn't as interesting, they would put the kids to work and make us entertain them doing talent shows, you know. So
your parents would do this?
Parents, aunts, grandma, grandpa, everybody. It's like, do Steve Urkel, do this impression. You know, it was like, you know, I was like, okay, all right, come on. And it was a lot of fun. It was fun. It was torture at the time. But as I got older, it started to become a thing of pride and excitement, you know, to be able to share. And it wasn't until I was 10 years old that I really got bit by the acting bug. I was doing a production, a Christmas play at a church in Landover, Maryland. And they needed someone to play the son of my mother. My mother was in the play. My dad was in the play. And what better person to play their son than their son? Mm-hmm. So
this was you said this is at a church play?
It was a church play. I got my start in theater doing church plays. And
what denomination?
Baptist denomination. And my mom had to push me a little bit and encourage me to go on stage. And I only had one line, Michael, one line in one direction: say hi and sit on the couch. And of course, I made a big deal about it and cried because I didn't want to go on stage. I didn't want to do it.
You were shy.
I was shy. I was incredibly shy. And especially around people that I didn't know. And so I was in this church and filled with, it had to have been like 15 to 2,000 people. And I had to go sit down on this stage and just listen. And it was terrifying. But when I did it, something just snapped for me. I said, this is really exciting. This is what I want to do. I don't know what this is called per se, because I didn't have the words at that time, but I want to be a part of it. And I remember telling my mom, and she said, okay, well, we're going to get you into the next play. And so it just kept going and kept going and kept going. And I was afraid of pursuing my dream of acting, because when I was 10, I told myself that I wanted to be an actor, but there were other influences that encouraged me not to do it, was saying that I would never make it. And I took that to heart. And so I then decided that I was going to become a doctor, because doctors help people and I liked science. So I studied that all through middle school and high school, and went to Xavier University in New Orleans, which is #1 for sending African Americans to medical school. And I hated it. I hated it. My freshman year into my sophomore year, I said, I don't want to do this. I'm miserable doing this. And I did not want to have a life where I was miserable. And I have seen so many people take a route that either they had to because of circumstances or fear. But I didn't want to be that person. I said, you know what? If I'm able-bodied and able-minded to go out after my dreams, I'm going to figure it out and do it.
Mom and dad supported it?
My mom was a big cheerleader, big cheerleader. At that time, my dad was not present in my life. And so she just wanted what was best for me. And while I was going back and forth, as I call it, a love affair with the arts, I was pursuing other endeavors to make sure that I had enough money on the table to feed myself. But performing was always there. It was always a part of me. And it took a while until I was ready to pursue this full time. Life had to wear me down a little bit, you know, for me to give up and say, go follow your dreams. But eventually I did that, and I went to graduate school at the University of Tennessee. And from there, I migrated to New York because I got a little snap, crackle, and pop going on in New York. Some agents were interested. And I said, well, let's give it a shot. And the doors just kind of opened, working, as I said, at Classic Stage Company, working at Lincoln Center, my Broadway debut with Brian Cox, The Great Society, then going to regional theater, doing Sweat at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, doing Sweat Arena State.
By Lynn Nottage, which won the Pulitzer Prize and was a groundbreaking play. You originated the role of Chris.
Yes.
And Chris's story, tell us a little bit about Chris.
So Chris is a factory worker in Reading, Pennsylvania. And he is on the track to become a teacher. And he is best friends with a guy named Jason, who also is a factory worker. And both of their parents work in the factory. And they are at a point of crisis because of the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is shifting factory work in basically the Rust Belt, which includes Reading, Pennsylvania, and closing a lot of these factories down. So these people are in the fight of their life because their whole livelihoods are being challenged. So this becomes a story of community, also a story of redemption because a crime is committed, a story of rebuilding because we see this vibrant city go from life to essentially nothing. And the inhabitants are striving to kind of keep their lives going at that time. And Chris is in the middle of it, trying to figure it out.
He has a close friend, right, in this play.
Jason. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm. What happens to the two of them?
So there's a little brawl that happens at the local bar. One of the barkeeps at this bar goes after what he wants. And he decides to cross the line while the factory is under strike. Well, the union, we've gone strike, and we are not wanting this factory to continue. We don't want it to shut down. And so Oscar, I believe that's his name, decides to take advantage of the opportunity and get a job, a good paying job with benefits. And Jason sees him in the bar and he's upset about it. He didn't appreciate it, that he's taking his job, if you will, and he takes it out on him. Frustrations line up and it spreads. Jason's agony and frustration spreads to Chris's agony and frustration, and there's an assault. Oscar is assaulted along with the bar owner, Stan, and they're sentenced to 5 to 8, maybe 10 years in prison. So the plans that each of these gentlemen have had, or all of these people in the city have had, are changed in an instant. And we are also briefly introduced to the injustice of the justice system through this play as well. So there's a lot of components that are introduced in this play.
Was that your first introduction to Lynn Nottage's work, or had you worked on other plays of hers?
I have not worked on other plays of hers, but I knew of her work. You know, by the way, Meet Vera Stark, Intimate Apparel, Ruined. I was aware of her work, but this was definitely my introduction to her personage. I have not met her in person.
How can you talk a little bit about that process? Because a great American writer like Marcus Gardley, Lynn Nottage, you're there in process with her. Mm-hmm. Do you know at the time that you're creating something together that is going to put a ripple in the zeitgeist, so to speak? Does it have that feeling?
You know, we always hope as artists that whatever we work on is going to have an effect, right? We always, that's the dream. And oftentimes I find it in my experience, there's no way to really tell if it's going to work or if it's not, you know? I knew that there was something very special about this piece. I knew that. And I love the fact that it's centered on community. And I love the fact that it was very present and very much, like I said, with Marcus' writings, urgent. How people were going to respond to it, I was unsure. But I was honored to be in the room with Lynn Nottage and Kate Waschke, who were so instrumental in crafting this piece and making sure that these characters leaped off the page. And
Kate Waschke, the director.
The director, yes, Kate Waschke, the director, and lived on stage and vibrated in such a way that it left an indelible mark in the audience, and it did. It did. I remember when we premiered it at OSF, the visceral reaction you could hear from the audience, from the fight at the end to the very last moments of the play, where we get the message of the importance of community, that there was a collective sigh, a sigh of relief, a sigh of agony, a sigh of understanding, a sigh of connection. All of that was so palatable in the audience. And I was fortunate to be a part of that. But to answer your question, at the time, I wasn't sure.
Is there a through line that you feel as an actor working on this material, some kind of commonality in great writing that you could put your finger on? If you could describe what that is, what would it be?
You know, they used to say in the church, in the Baptist church, we hope that when you walk through the doors of this building, that you won't leave the same way that you came in. And I think that's what theater does. I think that's what great writing does. It takes you on a journey. William Shakespeare, Lynn Nottage, Marcus Gardley, they all take their audiences on a journey. Much like Marcus Gardley's translation, how it reflects, you know, San Francisco in a specific time period, and how William Shakespeare brings humanity to such complicated characters. It reflects our being. And it's the hope that we could preserve humanity through our own actions.
Have you done a lot of Shakespeare?
Have I been immersed in Shakespeare? Have I become acquainted with it? Have I worked on it? Yes. Performed it? Not nearly as much.
Is Shakespeare something you go after? Is it something that you just do when it comes your way? Is it something you drop everything else for in order to do? Where does it live in your world as an artist, Shakespeare's work?
You know, honestly, I take Shakespeare with the same reverence that I take August Wilson, with the same reverence with Lynn Nottage, Lorraine Hansberry, Marcus Gardley, Chekhov, and connect with the individual pieces of each of Shakespeare's plays. And if I'm moved by it, if I am empowered by it, if it makes me feel uncomfortable, I certainly would leap at taking the opportunity to tell the story.
Okay, that's something really interesting. You just said, if it makes you uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
Why would that be something that piques your interest?
Where there's discomfort, there's room to grow. You know, we can't, you know, if we're always comfortable, you know, it doesn't get us anywhere. And for me, I'm always seeking those characters or those stories that challenge, that push, you know. And if it does make me uncomfortable, it makes me ask, why does this make me uncomfortable? And then I'm going through my whole psychological analysis of what this is and what this character is and what this play speaks about, and then going to my therapist and talking about it, you know. But after it, when I go on the other side of it, it's like, oh, I grew from that, you know? And I feel it makes me a stronger artist.
Was there anything in Edmund that made you, Tramell, uncomfortable?
Yes. Yes. There is a familiarity with Edmund's manipulation that made me feel very uncomfortable. It was almost as if it was a little too easy, a little too accessible. You know, it's like, it should not be this easy, Tramell. But I understood where that was coming from.
Well, Edgar? Edgar? Could his hand have writ this? How could his heart and brain breed it? When did you receive this letter? Who brought it?
It was not brought to me, my lord. That's what's so cunning about it. I found it. It was tossed through my window.
And you know the character to be your brother's?
If the content of the letter was akin to kindness, I would swear that it was his. But considering how the letter reads, I would gladly think it were not. That said, it is writ with his penmanship, but surely not his heart.
Has he ever spoken to you about such business?
Never, my lord, never.
What?
Well, I must confess that often I have heard him declare that when sons reach adulthood and their fathers grow old, the father should place himself into the son's hands, and the son should get his hands on his father's money. But
Villainous!
You were uncomfortable with the comfort of the manipulation that Edmund executes.
Yes. I was, yes. And I said, what does this say about me? You know? But I like I said, I understood where it come from. I understood where he was going. He was doing what needed to be done in his world. And I understand that.
And you relate to that because you have had to be an operator, a manipulator to some extent, or you feel you have that in you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, being a queer man of color in America, we have to do a great balancing act. We're oftentimes in rooms where we're the only one, you know? And whether we decide to code switch, if you will, whether we decide to play along just to get along, or whether we decide to disrupt, that's a burden to carry, you know? And all of these spaces that we enter in, we have to figure out, where do we fit into that? And what do we want? Who is going to work with us and who's going to work against us?
But such is the game when men can't see they're being played. Since I can't have my father's land by birthright, I'll cut my peace by being conniving and using my mother's wit. All will be mine through cunning. This is a sport for which I am quite fit. Hey, baby.
And I don't want to suggest that me as a queer man of color walking into these spaces, I'm easily manipulating everybody. That's not the case. But there's definitely strategy that's happening, you know? And that's, unfortunately, or fortunately, unfortunately, that's naturalistic. We do that. We do that everywhere we go. We decide which mask to put on or which mask to take off, who to talk to, who not to talk to. Should I sit next to this person on the train or should I not? You know, it's like all of those things, because it's survival, you know. And until we get to a space where we create equitable spaces where we don't have to code switch and we can incorporate different cultures into our everyday life, and it's just the norm, this is an element that we have to walk in and deal with.
Do you feel like it's thrust on you, like you have to be an activist because of the identity that you have, or do you feel like it's just something that goes with the territory of being an artist?
I don't think it's thrusted for me. I think it's a choice. I remember one playwright, Jeremy O'Harris, had spoke about it's not necessarily my job to be responsible for people's healing. And it was really enlightening to me because he has a point, you know, he doesn't have to take care of people, or he doesn't have to serve as an activist in that way. Now, for me, it's in my blood. I come from a family of civil rights activists. My grandparents were very instrumental with the NAACP and actually integrated the first school in Petersburg, Virginia, and sent their 6 daughters to these schools. So, you know, parents were also very instrumental in voting rights and getting people to sign up. I remember as a kid walking around the neighborhood, getting signatures and letting people know about the changes that were happening in the neighborhood, whether it's happening on the highway or whether a new store is coming in. So activism and community engagement has always been a part of my life, and it still continues to this day. And I really believe that the arts is my form of activism. It's how I show up. It's how I speak to people. It's the conversations much like this and the audiences that will partake in it, their conversations after this and about this. It moves forward. I feel that it moves the needle forward.
Are your parents both still active and activist now?
I think in different ways. My mom certainly stays active in making sure that I stay humble. And
She's your activist. She's an activist on you.
Yes, she is. Making sure that I stay humble and never forget where I come from. You know.
You mentioned that your father was not in your life at a certain time. And is he back in your life now?
No, he's not. I learned a valuable lesson. There's a philosophy growing up about the importance of family. It wasn't until I got older that I understood that there is a difference between your biological family and your chosen family. There are so many things, such circumstances, situations that took place that I had to lean more on my chosen family than my biological family. And I firmly believe that it is unloving to ask of someone. I firmly believe that it is unloving to ask someone for something that they are unable or unwilling to give. And so with that, I had to accept what is and champion for my own healing for not getting what it is that I felt that I needed and move on. Sometimes, you know, those people that we think will be a part of our lives, they're not. And that's okay, because I believe that God, the universe, ancestors will send those people who should be there and who will be there and who will help to fill that void. And I've been fortunate to be the recipient of that blessing.
Can you talk about your chosen family? When you say that, who comes to mind?
I think about my best friend of 16 years from Jackson State University, Rashida Elskari. She has been like a sister to me, and she is one of the many people that I hold dear to my heart. I think about some of the other beautiful people that I met at Jackson State University, some people that I've met at Xavier University. I think about the people at OSF who I have grown very close with. Also, just a lot of people just along the way of this journey. And you know, Michael, that the art form takes us all across the world, especially if we're lucky.
Mhm.
And we'll encounter people that are here for a moment, and then we'll encounter people that are here for a lifetime. And I've been fortunate to have those people that I am not directly related to who have stuck by me and have been encouraging and have held my hand and challenged me to go after what I want and to just be a better person.
Is church still a part of your life?
It is, in a different way, because I believe theater to be a form of church. We congregate. We're all coming from different experiences. There's a set standard or rule: when to rise, when to sit, when to be quiet, when to laugh. And the intention is to leave different than the way we came in. We're united. We become united. We develop a sense of community when we go to the theater. And I feel that theater is a reflection of church. I also believe that we as individuals, we are the church. You know, we are individual ministers, if you will, and representations of the good news of what can be possible of love and forgiveness and joy.
You're starting to do a lot more work on television.
Yes,
You've done a lot, and you're doing more.
I am.
You were on Dietland, correct?
Yes, Dietland with Julian Margulies and Joy Nash. Yes.
As a series regular?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
And now you're doing something for Apple TV?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. It's called Severance. Have you heard about it?
I have heard about it. And I've been cheering you on when I see the trailer. So can you talk a little bit about the experience of being on set versus being on stage?
Okay, so this is really interesting because the experience being on set in the pandemic era where we are now is vastly different from being on set pre-pandemic. And then that is also different from being in theater on stage. Theater is so communal. We spend so much time in the rehearsal space, bonding, getting to know one another, connecting, even if we're not in the same scenes. We're all in this rehearsal space trying to figure this thing out. That doesn't happen so much with life on set. When I was filming Severance, for the sake of safety, they kept us separate, you know. And that prohibited us from getting to know one another, to form those bonds. And the irony is that so many people that were part of the project on Severance have theater or improv backgrounds where we thrive on community. So when we got together, you know, we had to keep distance and 6 feet apart. And it was like, I want to go talk to Patricia Arquette, but I can't, you know, or I want to go chat with John Turturro, but I can't because we just have to keep space, you know. Fortunately, it does serve the play, or fortunately, it does serve the show, because the show is all about separation.
Right, called Severance. What is can you just give us an encapsulation of the story in this that the series is exploring and your role in it?
Yeah. So the story follows a group of people that are working on the severed floor of Lumen Industries. And severance is a procedure that is completely voluntary, where you can separate your work life from your personal life. And those people that are part of the severed floor, that are on the severed floor, have no recollection of who they are outside of Lumen, and vice versa. My role in this is I manage the severed floor, and I'm in charge of office culture and productivity. He says, raising his eyebrows.
Somebody who is rather manipulative when all is said and done.
Yes, yeah. There's a theme here.
So you said pre-pandemic, being on set was different just because you could converse, you could be at craft services talking and getting to know each other.
You can hang out in people's dressing rooms. We could do a cast party. You know, you can go to somebody's house and, you know, you can congregate with one another. We couldn't really do that with Severance, you know, and totally makes sense.
Do you think do you think that actually ultimately enhances the chemistry that's required for this story to be told?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely enhances it. There are moments where I was on set and I was watching John Turturro, Zach Cherry, Adam Scott, and Britt Lauer communicating with one another because they're part of this specific floor. And they were laughing and joking, and I'm sitting off to the side, and I was jealous. I didn't like it because I couldn't be a part of that, you know? So I used that and took it out on them, you know, on their characters later. But seeing that separation really, really fueled the performance and the experience of working at Lumen.
Do you think that it's going to be challenging, assuming that when all of these pandemic restrictions are finally lifted and SAG-AFTRA contracts make it possible for you to mingle, do you anticipate that that's going to actually be weirdly challenging now that this sort of culture has been established?
I can say on some level it may be. I remember trying to go to a gathering, and it was a small gathering, for the first time during I want to say maybe the second phase where it was okay to kind of step into the water. And I thought I was gonna have a panic attack. There was so many people, so many masked faces, you know, asking people whether or not it's okay to hug, you know, taking that care and just, oh my gosh, I remember being in the theater for the first time in a Broadway show. When Broadway came back, I went to a show and we were sitting on top of each other and I was absolutely terrified, you know? So for me, I think it's going to be tough, but then there's also that need, that connection, that drive, that thirst for human touch. You know, it's that when you get that hug and you see the smile for the first time they hadn't seen in a while, you know, all of that, I think it'll just melt away. It's a slippery slope, but I think initially it will take some time, but after a while, once we get it, we're like, okay, we can do this. And then they'll have to separate us again. It was like, okay, get off John Turturro, Tramell. Walk away, you know, leave him alone. So yeah, we need it. I miss it. I miss it terribly.
Do you have any theater lined up that you know you're going to be doing anytime soon?
So I am getting ready to go to Chicago to do a show at the Goodman Theater with the very funny Sean Hayes. The show is called Goodnight Oscar, and it chronicles the story of Oscar Levant in 1958 being released from Mount Sinai Mental Hospital to go do the Jack Parr show for one night only. And you see the hijinks and stress that ensues during that.
And the character you play is?
I play Oscar's orderly. So unfortunately, my character has no idea what he's getting himself into. He thinks that he's going to a graduation for his daughter. And then he gets there at the NBC studios and realizes, wait, what is going on? What is happening? Yeah.
Is there a role that you're just, that you know you would just drop everything for, that you're dying to play?
I gotta say it. I have to say Edmund in King Lear. I would love to do that on stage.
I know this director named ERIC Ting, who's directing the production at Cal Shakes. I think maybe you want to give him a call.
We'll get his number.
We'll introduce you to each other.
Yes.
Any others? I mean, all right. I mean, is it a cliche to say Hamlet?
I mean, I would love to play Hamlet, but it's funny because I always get cast in Laertes. I've done Laertes. So I tend to question whether or not I have the emotional turmoil to play Hamlet. But I think I could. I would talk, and maybe I'd talk myself out of it, because I've never been asked to play Hamlet. Audiences, if you are listening right now, I have not been asked to play Hamlet.
I'm going to start a petition because you should.
I would love to. I would love to play Hamlet. Hamlet, Mackers. It's unconventional. Iago. I think a special production of Othello and playing Iago would be really, really, really fun. I would love to dig into the piano lesson with August Wilson. Those are some of the top ones.
Mm-hmm.
Top ones. Yeah.
When you started working on Edmund, or in this journey of getting to know Edmund, do you imagine what would have happened had he not died in this story? What would have happened to him?
I think he had to die. I think he had to die, because if he did not die from the wound inflicted on him by Edgar, I believe he would have died by the guilt and the shame of what was done to that kingdom. Witnessing a father carry their lifeless daughter in their arms and then watching him pass away from that, I believe would have been too much. So I think he would have had to die.
Had he not been so mistreated by his father, would he have been? Would you think he would have been a heroic figure, a powerful figure, nonetheless? Did he have all of that in him?
I think he did. He's brave, man. He's smart. He's passionate. You know, he had all the makings, but he was part of a system that did not appreciate his value and his livelihood. And when that happens, it can push people to do some very amoral things.
At least we bastards are born from the pure pleasure that comes from fiery lovemaking, which is why our blood boils when we're wronged. Unlike these panty-waist wimps, conceived in stale marriage beds by snoring morons mired in matrimony. Well then, legitimate Edgar, perhaps I'll take your land. Why not? Let's see if our father loves his bastard as much as he loves his legitimate.
Any writers that you're particularly drawn to right now outside of theater, just writers in general, people you read?
I love the works of Walter Mosley, Colton Whitehead. I'm just starting his book, Sag Harbor. And I finished The Nickel Boys and the Underground Railroad. So I'm kind of on this Colton Whitehead kick. I love James Baldwin. I'm that kind of guy. I don't want it on an iPad. I want the hard copy. I want to smell it. I want to hold it. I want to turn the pages. So I am just consuming literature right now.
Do you write in the margins too?
No, I don't. I don't. But I guess because it's like it feels so sacred to me. I don't want to like mess up the the layout. But I have been reading books that have been borrowed, and I see writings and highlights within the book. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting note. Yeah, I would highlight that too.
You think there's a writer in you?
I do. I used to write poetry. I used to write short stories. I used to write plays. Actually, I wrote a play during the pandemic. Look at that. I forgot about that. Yeah, there's a writer in me. It's there.
Well, I hope that we all get to meet him when he comes out.
Be careful what you hope for.
Before we wrap up, I just want to ask a couple questions. One about the process of creating this podcast series. So it wasn't theater, it wasn't television. Was it gratifying or did it feel strange? Was it both? What was the experience like?
Well, this was my first major podcast. And it was really thrilling because I didn't know what to expect. And I didn't know how to be in the studio. But when I walked in the studio and you had the mic there and you had the glass window, I just felt like a superstar. I just wanted to sing a song in the mic. But, you know, it was really cool to be able to bring this vocal life and use the entire body. You know, there's an element in theater where using the entire body in an expressive manner may not translate in the character on the day of the play when we're doing it. But when you're doing a podcast, you can just let fly. You know, you can stretch, you can jump. As a matter of fact, there were specific exercises Eric asked me to take part in Eric Ting, yes, to help tell this story of Edmund's journey. And that was really, really fun. I took for granted how visceral, how much the body comes into play when telling a story through a podcast.
And did you get a sense of community despite the distance, or did it feel isolated to you?
I was fortunate. I was working with a majority of artists that I had worked with before. So I knew them. And even though I would see them on the Zoom screen, or I knew they were, 2 or 3 rooms away, I longed to be in the same space with them, but it just wasn't possible in that world. But it was great to be able to share space with them. And those that I had not been acquainted with, it was wonderful just to watch their work.
So when all is said and done, what is it that you are left with from this story of King Lear?
One question that lingers for me is how we treat our elderly. Do we give our elderly the respect that they deserve? Another is the cost of ambition and greed. Another thought I would share would be the perspective of family. What does it look like? What does it mean? who do we claim to be family and who just happens to be related to us.
What do you hope for the audience?
I hope they hear the passion and the eclectic voices that have been utilized to bring life to this story. And I hope they see themselves in the midst of this somewhere along the line, that there are people in this story that they can identify with one way or the other. I think that is what Shakespeare intended, to showcase people. He wrote for the people. And I hope those that are listening will see that and feel that this is accessible and that this, Shakespeare, is for you.
Tramell Tillman, thank you for being a part of the bonus content series for King Lear. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I definitely hope we see you as Edmund somewhere, somehow, not just hearing you. And I hope we get to see you as Hamlet. I hope we get to see you in the piano lesson.
Yes.
I hope that all of these things come true and that we read your work someday.
Yes, absolutely.
It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you.
Likewise.
You've been listening to the Play On Podcast bonus content series. You can learn more about the Play On Podcasts at Next Chapter Podcast's website, ncpodcasts.com. That's N as in next, C as in chapter, podcasts with an S at the end.com, where you can find other Play On podcast series and interviews, along with talk podcasts like the 500, the 10, the Tough Juice podcast with Karan Butler, and a whole lot more. I'd like to thank Jeremiah Tittle, the founder of Next Chapter Podcasts, and my producer, Peter Musto. Our audio engineer is Adam Bernard, and our editor and sound designer is Justin Cortez. Be sure to subscribe to Next Chapter Podcast for updates on all the latest content, and don't forget to rate and review our shows. I'm Michael Goodfriend, and I look forward to sharing more incredible works and scripted fiction with you, along with lots of enlightening bonus content at Next Chapter Podcasts.